can it be possible in a year? Sure. Do you have investors? What's the go-to-market strategy, right? And so how many clients or prospects do you have, or are you talking to? What's the closing ratio? Like the people, they have no idea about these numbers, you know? If you don't know the numbers, you can't do the math. Well, how's that a target, right? Like if you don't have specific goals by a specific date, it's just it's a dream, right? It's a wish waiting to happen. So there's an action plan that needs to happen in order for that to actually take flight. I've known some agencies that don't even send a report to their clients. In fact, they don't even share the amount of funds that are being invested. And some agencies, they actually go and they manage the account for Meta and for Google specifically. Come to find out that because they're managing it, they're not dropping the whole 10K into the channel.
With me today is Neil Persaud. He's the head of growth at MadHub, award-winning marketing professional, 60 million plus in sales revenue, and he is the proud father of 2 kids. Neil, how are you feeling today?
Fantastic. Zifko, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good, man. Thank you so much for taking the time and for talking sales. And I think there's a lot of important topics that I want to cover because you've been there, you've done it, you've done all kinds of shapes and forms of sales. And I feel like a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions, or they're trying to chase things that don't work anymore. So the first thing that I want to ask you is, a lot of people are still working on their business or in their business, and they're kind of going flip-flopping back and forth, but they still have to generate a lot of revenue. You have to go for the sales. You have to do some marketing. What are some of the revenue angles that you see that work the best with the people that you work with while operating in the business?
Yeah, it's challenging, right? Like depending on the team, size of team, I should say, right? Because if you're a solopreneur, you have to do everything. There's no delegation, right? And so I think the first thing is, recognizing or being self-aware in that particular stage of growth or journey that you're on, and then holding yourself accountable for the goals that you seek to accomplish, right? Like I'm on hundreds of calls per week, and it's baffling at times when people, I ask them straight, and I'll say, okay, so what's the revenue goal? What's the target? As much as I possibly can. Well, how's that a target, right? Like if you don't have specific goals by a specific date, it's just it's a dream, right? It's a wish waiting to happen. So there's an action plan that needs to happen in order for that to actually take flight.
So you're saying there has to be specific goals, but they also be like with time and well-defined. Now, what have you seen to be wishful thinking, where you're like, this is not real? Like, how would you do this? Versus, I can see that you have a plan and a goal, and this is challenging, and we can achieve it. What is that difference?
I mean, look, everyone, for the most part, if they're unrealistic about their goals, they're not going to know what it takes in order to scale properly, right? So they may have caviar or champagne tastes, but Coca-Cola and fries budget, right? And so like understanding, yeah, I want to make $10 million. Okay, great. What's your ARR right now? Oh, we're at 500K. Well, when do you want to make 10 mil? I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying, can it be possible in a year? Sure. Do you have investors? What's the go-to-market strategy, right? And so how many clients or prospects do you have, or are you talking to? What's the closing ratio? Like the people, they have no idea about these numbers. If you don't know the numbers, you can't do the math. So it's all relative, right? Like understanding how many at-bats do you need before you actually close a deal? And so what's the closing ratio? What's the show rate? Never mind the closing ratio. How many people actually show to the meeting? And what are you doing? What processes or systems do you have in place in order to effectively improve that show ratio to close ratio?
It feels like you threw like a lot of numbers, and then people were like, wow. It feels like there are specific things that everyone should be looking at, should know their numbers before having any sort of goals or plans or aspirations, because without those numbers, the math cannot be done. Not even accurate, but it's just the math cannot be done. So what are some of those like main core things you have to have? You mentioned ARR, you mentioned closing ratio, show up rate. What else should you always have a clear number about?
And you should know your margins, obviously, right? Cost of goods. Anytime you can try to reduce your cost of goods, or look at, strategic partners that can help you operate more efficiently, but also like looking at a revenue stream by way of strategic alignment, that will always help, right? Anytime you can get revenue working in the business for the business is always a plus, right? So if you're negotiating with vendors, see if they're open to that particular referral basis, or at least dropping points on the spread based on a grandfather clause. So what I mean by that is, okay, I'm working with you, for example, right? If we're looking at structuring a deal and I need to get a product from point A to point B and you're in logistics, if I extend the terms of that agreement, can I get a better working rate with you because I'll be working with you for a longer period of time? On the receiving end, someone would say, well, you're just trying to, cut me down or ask for a discount. Well, no, I'm looking to extend a lifetime partnership or a longer term, and by doing so, I'm seeking in good faith the opportunity for us to have a preferred rate in order to extend that term over a longer period of time, instead of coming back to me a year after year and asking for renewal or looking at negotiating terms each quarter, right? So there's ways that you can strategically articulate the deal, for lack of a better term, right? But like most owners and operators, they should know their margins. That's 101, right? It's the levels of where you want to scale. That's where the math comes into mix, right? Like, what's your cost per acquisition, right? What's your conversion rate, right? How many leads are coming into the funnel? From those leads, how many are warm? How many book the meeting from you? So how many people are booking per week, right? From the bookings per week, how many people are showing up to the meetings? From the show rate, right? How many people are getting a quote or a proposal? From those proposals, what's your closing ratio on those deals, right? And so, like, if you're averaging at 30%, then obviously you're doing something right. If it's much higher than that, then perhaps you're underpriced, which means you have to go back to the drawing board to figure out exactly, where you would be. And so, like, every refinement along that journey requires, optimization, right? Because those are all challenges that need to be overcome in each step or phase.
Interesting. Now, you're saying there are levels to the game. So at one point, when you're looking at getting to a positive, to an outright positive state, it's one thing. Once you start talking about scale, now things become really, really granular because you need to control multiple pieces of the funnel. What do you say when someone says, Neil, my business is very different? It doesn't work like this.
Everyone says the same thing. Everyone's business is 100% unique. And rightfully so, right? Like, you could have two brands operating in the same ecosystem. They could be direct competitors, but their goals are different. The brand resonates with their audience much differently. Their process could be different, right? And so, like, without understanding what the challenges are or getting all the skeletons out of the closet, you can't really help them, right? And, in order to be a true partner, because, like, I'm in it for the legacy play, right? I'm not in it for the quick bag. I'm not, there's enough smoke and mirrors out there in digital marketing that, people are learning on somebody else's dime by all these quote unquote self-proclaimed subject matter experts that are out there now. And really, they're probably running Chat or Gemini or Claude and trying to figure this stuff out, and then being a glorified PM and outsourcing it out to different individuals, right? But that'll work up to a certain point, right? Until it doesn't. And then when it doesn't, you have to ask yourself the hard questions, or if the owner operator is challenging the vendor at large to be like, okay, show me the proof, because the numbers don't lie, right? But point of story is that, every business is unique. There's not one that is exactly the same. You're going to have different headcount. You're going to have different revenue goals. Some people want to exit. Some people are lifers, right? And so, like, the strategy that is accompanying that particular deliverable needs to be unique. That's why at MadHub, we have this continuous learning loop, right? Mm-hmm. We don't treat it as a set and forget it. Nothing's on autopilot. Yeah, the sandboxes are the same, right? They don't change. We play in $1 trillion sandboxes, right? So when you're looking at Meta, Google, Snap, TikTok, etc., LinkedIn, like, they don't change. What changes is a strategy, right? Based on the brand, protecting that brand, being responsible, being accountable for the growth, right? And or the traction that's required in order for our clients to seek that next revenue milestone.
Now, you mentioned something interesting here. You said that you play in the same sandbox and you're doing all these different strategies. What is the difference when you work as a strategic partner with MadHub, with you, versus what is the thing that everybody's pitching nowadays? You see a lot of pitches for strategic partnership. I feel like it's a synonym for free work most of the time. Let's partner on this. Let's partner on this. And when you start going into the math, like all of a sudden that partnership becomes like a free work. So tell me the difference when you work on something, when someone works with MadHub, how is that strategic partnership different?
Well, first off, like there's only one Neil Persaud, right? Ego aside, right? But like realistically, I've been doing this for almost 25 years now, right? Personally, I've helped scale 8 agencies over the course of my career and helped put 5 independent agencies on the Global Mail's Growth 500 list, recognized as one of Canada's fastest growing companies, right? I've also had the privilege and opportunity to sit on 12 different boards. And so whether it's local chambers of commerce, BUILD, which is the Building in the Industry Land Development Association, been involved with the CKCA, the Canadian Kitchen Cabinet Association. Like I was the co-chair for the Milton Chamber Breakfast Club, co-chair for marketing for the Kids in Camp charity. We send 500 underprivileged kids to camp each year. I consulted for the city of Mississauga for the Small Business Economic Consortium for 6 months, helped them put off their digital talk track, and actually keynoted their kickoff launch for that digital marketing series. And not all agencies are created equal, right? I'm totally with you, right? So what you see is what you get, and I try to be a partner for the prospects or clients that I serve to really understand their business and the vision and where they're headed. Right now, you said the elephant in the room, right? The term partner, right? Like it's used so loosely, right? Like we want to be your partner. I want to be your growth department, right? My goal is to connect with someone to say, hey, we're at $1 million ARR and we're working with them for a few years and they become our next case study to be at 6, 10, 30 million, for example, right? That's my goal.
What is the difference when you're talking with someone going from, let's say, $500,000 to 5, and when someone wants to go from 5 to 25? There has to be a difference in the game that is played. So from a vendor perspective, a strategic partner, what do you start to look at when someone says we are, let's say we're a D2C brand, and we're going from $500,000 and we're on track, we are going that way, but our goal is 5, we have reached 5, versus someone says we want to go to 25, we are at 5 already. What is the strategy that you start to say, like, this is the way that I see this on repeat?
Yeah, to be honest, there's not one concise answer that's going to address that, because like as I mentioned before, every business is going to be unique. So realistically, we need to figure out the mindset of the actual players on C-suite or within leadership, right? Because if they proclaim that they have a growth mindset, but they really just like they're their own bottleneck, that's really a concern. So for us, it's more or less lining up on personality and understanding, like they know that they require a partner in order to take things to the next level. Otherwise, they would have done it by now, right? The other thing is that the difference between those two, I can speak on the opposite end. It's like the one business owner that's going from 5 to 10, for example, million. They've tested more. They've learned more, right? They may have worked with other vendors. They may have an in-house team. They understand where their strengths and weaknesses reside because they've been investing more into the ecosystem, right? When you have an owner operator investing into the sandboxes that are responsible for driving growth, they pay a little bit more attention, right? Because imagine if you're spending $50,000 a month, you want to see where that $50,000 is returning, right? And if you're seeing good months and bad months, you want to know and understand the differences between those two. So it would be testing and learning. That would be the key differentiator, right? And sometimes those individuals that are at the $500,000 mark trying to get over that hump or that stage, they don't know what they don't know. Well, both of them, for example, don't know what they don't know, right? And it's our job as subject matter experts to enlighten them based on the analysis and or audit that we provide that articulates the ebbs and flows of their business and our observations, knowing what's working and what might not be working in their particular vertical, right?
If you're going down the path and you're talking with someone brand new, it's a prospect, you guys are discussing and they're asking questions, what are some of the red flags? I don't know if you would call them red flags, but what are some of the signs that you're like, you are not ready to outsource marketing, this will not work out for you, my friend, or you are on the path, it's time, this is the time you need to outsource your marketing? What are those telltale signs if someone is sitting there and listening to the way you're explaining it, and they can start putting like some sort of a map in front of them?
Oh, I mean, red flags. Anyone that's looking for an out right off the bat is pretty much a red flag, right? Like I like to explain that like it's a marathon, not a sprint. Yes, rightfully so. You can have some quick wins in the early days because if things aren't set up the way they should be, there's some low-hanging fruit to cultivate. But the growth, the long-term growth, will outweigh the short-term wins, right? Because trends come and go, but like when you have a succinct strategy based on the neuroscience of human behavior and the alignment with creative in order to move the needle, that takes time, right? It can't be just a 30-day test, right? I'm not interested in test projects, right? If somebody comes to me and says, okay, great, we'll do a pilot with you guys. Well, thanks, but no thanks, right? Because the amount of time that we do to gear up and all the strategy that's involved prior to actually taking flight within a campaign, you've done so much pre-work for that to see the execution. And if you don't pivot based on real-time results from what the market comes back on, you can't navigate the journey accordingly, right? It's like you're not having a proper data set, right? So yeah, and anyone that says like, yeah, no, I know it, or they're not willing to make an initial required investment, right? For example, someone will say, okay, great, we'll test it with a 5K media spend. Well, if your total addressable market is millions of people, how far do you think $5,000 is going to get you into the ecosystem, right? And then you're going to judge us based on the limited visibility that you have within that ecosystem to warrant whether or not you're going to drop more into that particular channel to see results. Does that make sense?
It does, and it sounds like the people that are ready for outsourcing their marketing, it's not about the channel, it's about the strategy that they're like, look, I've heard it, I've seen it, I've seen competitors, they're crushing it in all these different verticals. I need to start figuring out, and once I unlock it, it will take time, but that's the right plan. Versus, we need to open a new revenue channel. Let's just try cold email. Neil, I want to do a test pilot. I'll put 5K for 3 months, and then we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, if someone's at the other end of the spectrum and they realize that performance, because we're a creative performance shop, right? So we get judged based on the amount of leads that we're driving into a sales funnel or the amount of widgets that are being sold, for example, right? And if they recognize that industry norms are XYZ and they're performing under that, or if they have a certain ROAS, a return on advertising spend, and that starts to dip or diminish, or they're losing customers, or their AOV, their average order value, or LTV, their lifetime value of that customer is trending downwards, they quickly raise their hand and be like, okay, we got to figure something out. Something's happened. Either there's a new player in the market, or what we've designed is not landing with our clientele, or there could be a product issue, right? And so, like, without opening up each particular avenue and investigating each rabbit hole specifically, you can't make a proper analysis, right? But the owner operator will say, okay, well, we need help to figure this out, right? And I think that's where either they have the wrong players in the wrong seats, right? And they're interested in status quo, or they're not just being mindful of how the business ops is moving.
Interesting. Now, if you're looking at this from like you were saying, there's multiple pieces that could be the telltale signs. If someone is talking about a go-to-market strategy, what are some of misconceptions that you've seen that someone calls it a go-to-market strategy? You're like, that's not a go-to-market strategy, my friend. This is something else. What is the confusion that you always see that you're like, no, no, this is what is a go-to-market strategy. This is what you call it. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, it's hard for me to say or answer that question, full transparency. Like, I think the biggest challenge in what I do, and I guess what we do,
Mhm.
is the X factor is always going to be human behavior, right? And especially when it comes to digital marketing, like when I say digital marketing to you, like look, how many types of different services could fall under that umbrella, right? There's a ton, especially if you're factoring in AI, right? Like it's a large, vague term, right? So if you don't specify like what are the actual services or what are the needs that you're trying to accomplish, what are the goals behind those needs, right? You can't properly suggest what are the right avenues and what's the right strategy to go to market, for example, right? But yeah, to answer that, like, yeah, it's a very challenging question because the thing I love most about my job is that every day is different, right? Like every day someone comes to me with a new challenge because they're in a different market or they're a different stage of growth or they're looking to accomplish a certain goal by a certain period of time, right? And so, but again, I put it back on like human behavior and understanding, right? Being self-aware, right? Like if someone proclaims that they know about all of this stuff to the nth degree,
Yeah.
like that's a huge red flag, first off, because no one knows everything about each particular channel in its entirety, right? um, if they did, they wouldn't be on the call.
It wouldn't be up.
And if that was the case, then they would need just somebody to push the buttons, right? And at which point in time, like that's a recipe for disaster as well, right? Because if it's one-way communication and not collaboration, you're not going to see success.
If we're talking about collaboration and the road to success, there has to be some sort of synergies in these processes because we all want to scale, but sometimes we scale our problems as opposed to actually scaling profitability. What are some of the methods that you do? What are the things that you make sure that you put in place when you're working with someone to really have synergy to scale?
Yeah, I think I like to attribute it back to a marriage, right? It's open, honest, transparent communication, right? So with us, like we've taken the old framework for agency client relations and turned it upside down. We're super fast in the efficiency when it comes to creative. We have in-channel Slack as well as communication on a daily basis with our clients. They're actually integrated into our teams, right? So it's like there's no lack of understanding or misalignment with regards to when things are due. I think an effective work back schedule and timely deliverables and being accountable for what you say you're going to do when you're going to do it. These are all common threads within our ecosystem that allow us to have that continuous learning loop that I mentioned to you before, especially when it comes to creative, right? Because creative's so subjective,
Yeah.
right? Like your blue, black, or navy shirt might be okay, or my black shirt might be fantastic. Like it really just depends, right? And it's the same thing when it comes to the ad, right? And so like I think it starts with brand, right? Like if you don't, as an agency, if we don't connect or have a thorough understanding of the brand positioning, tone of voice, messaging, and all of the creative assets that come along with it, or lack thereof, then we can't properly analyze and recommend certain strategies or tactics that we're going to be accompanying this particular campaign in order to drive the right results.
So it's that open, honest, and transparent communication. What do you say? That's what you will do. Having that learning feedback loop so that it's always scaling. There's always synergy between the agency and the brand, and you're always staying on top of
Yeah,
the
like we
brand.
have we have weekly check-ins with our clients, right? And sometimes bi-weekly, and then a full-on one-on-one complete diagnostics and report showing the good, the bad, the ugly, the strategy is where we're headed, the recommendations based on the actual real-time performance. And so like it goes without question. It's not to say that we're just sending over a PDF. I've known some agencies that don't even send a report to their clients. In fact, they don't even share the amount of funds that are being invested. And some agencies, they actually go and they manage the account for Meta and for Google specifically. So the agency will put it on their credit card.
Right.
They'll ask to tell the client, hey, listen, we're suggesting a 10K per month media spend across these two channels. But come to find out that because they're managing it, they're not dropping the whole 10K into the channel, right? And the client doesn't know any different, right? I mean, a less sophisticated client, that is. But like, if there's any area of a sophistication, that wouldn't be the operating process or Canadians anyways.
Right. It's
That's why digital marketing guys get a bad rep, right?
Yeah.
Because the few that are good, that are out there operating with full transparency, are always being skewed or taking a skeptical look because the other people have been burned before. I mean, let's think about it for a minute, right?
Mhm.
If you're aligned with an agency and they're doing what they're supposed to do or worth their grain of salt, you would never leave, right? So I often joke with my friends and colleagues about this. It's like sometimes I feel like I'm a psychologist, a therapist, right? Because people are bringing their baggage and I'm talking them off the ledge, right? Because they've been burned so many times before, and I don't blame them for being skeptical. I've kind of grown a second skin to it. But you have to talk to the doubts that they may have because of the past relationships from less professional operators.
And to me, it looks like if someone doesn't give you that transparency, that is something that is a red flag on the client side. Like if your agency is not 100% transparent with everything, that you have full control and they're just working the strategies on top of what you have, and it's more than just a PDF, but weekly calls or bi-weekly calls, investing and trying to understand, that is what truly a digital marketing agency is. Everything else it's not where you want to be. It's not the type of an agency you want to work with, because you might get burned at the end of the.
Well, not only that, I mean, look, if you're playing the agency game right now and you're aligned, I mean, this goes out to the audience at large, right? Like if you're working with a digital marketing agency and they're not being proactive with regards to their strategy or introducing new tools that's being adopted into our sector, they're doing you an injustice, right? If you feel that like the majority of the time that you're leading or asking the probing questions, and then you start to get some attention, you have to ask yourself, am I just a number for them, right? Or are they taking my business growth seriously, right? Because there's all types of different agencies out there, and there's a type of agency for you based on where you are on that growth journey, right? Obviously, everything has to come down to profitability, right? But how much are you willing to invest? If you look at any business, Zivko, like let's use this. Coca-Cola, right? Largest beverage in the world.
Right.
Like it's global. They still work with an agency, right? Why? They have hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of employees, right? And they still work with an agency, right? Because the strategy and ideas and the execution based on subject matter experts being in the trenches, understanding the ecosystems brings value, right? Because when a group of individuals continue to have a siloed approach and have their blockers on, and they're all talking amongst themselves in their sort of immediate circle, eventually you start to gate all the same answers. But that comes down to a leadership spot, right? If you're the leader hiring and you're surrounding yourself by yes men, you're going to get yes answers. No pushback, no resistance, no challenges, right?
It's this ideas and strategies that you're building. That is the moat of the agency, because you're there 24/7, you're discovering new tools and you're proactively suggesting it. You're proactively showing new strategies and methods to your clients versus just saying, this is what we're doing for 7 years. Let's just do cookie cutter for Mr. and Mrs. whatever business.
I mean, anyone that's selling packages, red flag. If anyone comes to you like, hey, we have 3 packages. We have a bronze, silver, and gold, or, platinum, like just red flag, right? Why would you want to buy a package?
Yeah.
Your business is unique. We had this conversation like a couple of minutes ago, right? So, Mr. Business Owner, your business is unique, but you want a package? Okay, great. Right? Everything we do is bespoke. It's 100% tailored towards the client's needs. It's specific for their goals and the objectives that they're trying to accomplish. That's not a package, right?
What do you say when you explain your approach to a client and they're like, well, I want an expert, Neil, and it sounds like you are a jack of all trades. You're going to do my PR and you're going to do my performance and you will do my SEO. How would this work,
Yeah.
Neil?
So let me just back up. So at MadHub, we're a creative performance design agency. So what that means is we take creative very seriously. We're not a catch-all solutions provider, right? So
Mm,
we're not integrating AI chatbots and workflow systems into the back end for your CRM. Do we have a CRM that could be offered? Yes, we do. Right? Can we train you on that? 100%. Does it connect to all your data? Absolutely. We're a Shopify partner. We're a Klaviyo partner. So if you're in the e-com world, Klaviyo is designed specifically for e-commerce businesses in order to help design flows and campaigns that allow you to increase your profitability
mhm.
over the duration of time, right? We have video production, we do animation, there's all types. Half the team is creative. We have 30 on staff, right? We're in year 4, right? So first, if someone's coming out and saying that they need a catch-all, and you're mentioning all these additional services that are outside our realm, I'll quickly, course correct, let them know that yes, we have partners in the game. Personally, I've been doing this for about 25 years, so the network is very strong. It's vetted,
Mhm.
and I'm happy to make a recommendation or bring them to the table so we can have an open, honest conversation and let them know that this is a partner of ours, and we're coming together based on the request. And at the end of the day, it's your choice as to whether or not you want selected partner or if you want me to go find another one, right? Um, but yeah, like I forgot the question at large.
It was more on. It sounds like you're explaining
Yeah,
there.
right.
Yeah.
Let me just speak to that. So my founder, our founder at MadHub, Yves Kardak, is Chief Creative Officer. He's been 20 plus years in the chair. The CTO at MadHub has been 20 years in the chair, Chief Technology Officer. The VP of Digital, another 15 plus years in the chair, right? I can keep going, right? And so, the point of story is that we have vetted professionals that have decades worth of experience in order to carve out our area of excellence and expertise to help the client achieve what they're looking to accomplish, right? I'll give you one example. We actually saved one of our clients a 7-figure lawsuit because of a compliance issue on a website, right? So when you're talking about partner, right, like a true partner, if we notice some stuff that's not operating the way it should be, we're going to bring it to your attention, right? And this was a compliance issue based on T's and C's for legal that we caught wind of and sort of course corrected in order to make an adjustment that ended up being helpful in a very trying and challenging situation, right? We have other examples where, our head of paid is 15 years in the chair, right? And one point in time, we're going to market for a client with some issues through Meta. It's a 2 a.m. call, right? On a Friday. Well, in other agencies I've been at, that's okay, thanks. You're not even getting a response. You'll get the response on Monday morning, right? We're dropping and flicking the switch Saturday. So a 2 a.m. Friday is essentially a couple hours away before we launch,
Yeah.
and we're on the call, right? And so, our tagline is we encourage crazy, right? You got to be a little crazy to be in the agency game, right? Like you either love it or you hate it. There's no in between, right? And if you're trying to hide, like it's not the place for you.
Interesting. You talked a lot about the team, and you talked a lot about the alignment that you guys have. What are some of the goal alignments that you're seeing when someone wants to work with a partner like you? What are you looking for specific goal alignments within their team on the client's side?
Yeah, I think I touched on this earlier. I think it has a lot to do with mindset, right?
Hmm.
We're looking for like-minded professionals that have an appetite for growth, that are seeking to take their business to the next revenue milestone, right? Whether that milestone means the next, double-digit million mark, or it could be in a successful exit, TBD, right? But we want individuals that aren't afraid to test, learn, and experiment. Have an experiment budget, that would be ideal, right? Like, yeah, I want to try TikTok, or I want to look at TikTok Shop, for example, in the States, right? Or I'm thinking about expanding to the US. How do I go about doing that, right? These are all things that we get excited about, right? Because it allows us to flex a little bit more, to try out some new things that otherwise would be, subpar, non-existent, because it would be safe, right? Because we have a confined budget, restricted, and we're not able to test different audiences and or different channels that would potentially get a better return. So mindset has a lot to do with that. The appetite for growth has a lot to do with that, right? And just the temperature on the other end, right? The attitude and the professionalism. Like I'll give you a short story. Like I met a gentleman one time at an event, and he approached me and says, like, you know, I spend a good 7 figures a day on a specific channel, and you'd be hard pressed to find anybody else in this room that operates at that scale. And I turned to my colleague and I said, do you know what brand he's talking about? And he was head to toe dripped in his brand. And I looked at him and I said, the brand you're referring to? Because I've never heard of you. I'm sorry. Please forgive my ignorance. But, you know, just the way he approached, I was not interested at all. I don't care how much money you have, right? If that's going to be our first encounter, can you imagine if something was to go wrong in any which way of that particular engagement and how he would be disrespecting or talking to the team? I'm not interested in putting the team under duress, right?
Yeah.
It's hard enough as it is. You know what I mean? Why add to it, right? So attitude has a lot to do with it, you know?
So when you're looking at when you're looking at talking with someone and you're trying to see if there's an opportunity, it sounds like there's not just about this is the brand, this is what we have as budget, this is what we tried. It's you're looking at that like person-to-person connection, or because you're translating how will this work, teamwork, goal alignment, how will this pass on in the next like 6 months or 1 year, not just for this first 90 days start of our campaign.
Absolutely. I'm a long-term play guy, man. I told you I'm in legacy, right? So when I'm trying to work with a client or do work with a client, I'm thinking years. I'm not thinking months.
Yeah.
Right. So absolutely, the human H-to-H relationship needs to be on point, because at the end of the day, it's real humans doing real work. Like nothing on our end is in a set it forget it mentality, or we just hand it off to Claude or Manus or Perplexity and just sit back and just, you know, regurgitate information on a pretty deck and then shipped it off. Like it's not how it's done. At least not with us, right? So the difference has a lot to do with the personality on the other end. Like, and to your point, like I'm not really interested in working with everybody either, right? I'm fully self-aware. We're not meant to work with everybody. And if that's the mentality that you have, like everyone you meet, you're going to close, you need to change that mentality, because like, I'm sure you can agree, you've had some clients that you've taken on that wasn't necessarily worth their weight in the actual line item.
Right. It's very true. In the beginning, I didn't quite understand two things. First one was that you really want to pick who you're going to work with, that you can deliver like strong results. And the second one is, can you handle working with a specific number of people? I always thought that was just a sales question versus a true question. If I bring 10 people today, can you actually onboard them? So when someone is working on a funnel, I now ask that question from like a logistics. I'm like, hey, I just want to be like very clear. Do you have a booking software? Do you have someone that will take the calls? What happens if they say, let's sign up tomorrow? Can you transfer it right away? And I'm not saying we'll close 10 people in a day. I'm saying, truly, can you handle this amount of volume, because the logistics, is it in place? And before, I thought that was just a sales question. I never really taught it seriously until you mature a little bit. You turn on a couple of funnels and you're like, wow, this is like drinking from a fountain.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Because like at the end of the day, if the client you're working with can't deliver on that, and you're doing what you do in order to strum up new business, you're just going to be having all these people line up to be waiting in line, right? And what does that do, not only for yourself, for the team, but the relationship at large, right? And so that's what I mean about like the mindset and the growth appetite, right? Because if your end client doesn't have that process, or at least the vision or forethought that, hey, this could be a hypothetical situation, what's your hiring practice, right? How many people do you have sitting on your roster right now, or potential, that you could just pick up the phone and call and they could start? Because eventually that's what's going to be required, right? And we all know talent is a very hard acquisition rate.
Yeah, it's absolutely very true. Now, when we talk about talent and bringing on people, what are some of the fragmented approaches that you've seen that people are trying to do with their marketing and their sales that you're like, is it fragmented when we talk about marketing channels, brand, tone of voice, or within the company, within the culture is very fragmented, not all in alignment?
I mean, there's multiple scenarios or situations that I come across on a regular basis, right? We'll start with the internal team, right? Fragmentation could reside in no one taking responsibility or ownership over the sales and marketing initiative. So there's no CSO, there's no chief sales officer, right? There's no CMO, chief marketing officer, right? It often resides with the founder, the owner, the operator, the CEO, the president, right? And trying to wear multiple hats. Well, think about anything that you do in life. If you try to do too many things all at once, you spread yourself way too thin, and you become overworked, and then you become, a little bit tarnished. You're not sleeping well, right? You have anxiety, right? Every decision feels like you're backed. When you're backed in a corner, I like to say what's called you're playing defense, right? I like to play offense, right? So, like, not to say that you can be defensive, but when you're playing offense and you're positioning in a way that allows you to think ahead, that's why I often attribute to, that's why I have the motorcycle helmets in the back, because I used to ride. Like, think about that for a minute. If you're a rider, even if you don't ride, when you're on a motorcycle, you got to plan 3-4 steps ahead, right? If you fail to plan 3-4 steps ahead, guess what happens? It's fatal, right? And furthermore, you have to focus. That's why motorcycles don't have a rear view mirror, because you can't look. It's not about what's happening back there, it's what's happening in front of you. And so if you don't articulate or navigate that road or that journey effectively, and pacing yourself at the right pace or speed, and planning the next move or lane change in the right fashion, it's detrimental, right? And so it's the same with business, right? If you know that you don't have the right players on the seat, or if you don't have the opportunity to delegate to your staff specific roles or responsibilities to get this looked after, you have no one else to blame but yourself. And that becomes self-awareness, right? And if you don't have the self-awareness to understand that you're only as strong as your weakest link, then how do you put the right players in the right seats, right? And sorry, I'm not trying to get off this like whole leadership thing, but it's like, at the end of the day, teamwork makes the dream work, as cliche as that sounds, right? And so if you realize that you're at a friction point and it needs to have some realignment, then you either outsource that or you internally fix the issue at large, and then you figure out who's responsible for what by when. And at that point in time, then you can have a serious conversation about, hey, we want to go from A to B in this duration of time. I read this book many years ago. It was introduced to me by one of the CEOs that first, earlier on in my career. It's called Scaling Up 2.0, part of the Rockefeller Habits. Vern Harnish is the actual author, and it talks about the alignment within players. But like the key takeaway from that book is called an OPSP, a one-page strategic plan, 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, blank. All team leads come to the room. We identify the North Star. We figure out all the action items that are going to take place, who's going to be responsible for what in each department. Then we report weekly on the cadence in order to determine whether or not we're marching down the same track or the road, right, to achieve our goal. And then if we're not, what do we need to do in order to tweak, optimize, or pivot to make sure that we're handling these challenges and nuances within the business so that we can actually hit the ground running and level up. But it's a great book. The first time I read that book, I did $700,000 contracted revenue in less than 10 months. The second time I read that book, I did 2.5 million in about 2.5 years and helped grow a team from 7 to 24. The third time I read that book, I did 3.5 million in 10 months. It took a team from 50 to 90. So like it's great. It's being self-aware is a very key fundamental observation that one must entertain, right? It's about that whole yes man thing again, right? Like if everyone in the room is being silent and just doing this, you're in the wrong room, or you have the wrong players in the wrong seats, because you can't be 100% right. It's not possible, right? And so like if no one's willing to challenge your position or your strategy, and respectfully, obviously, right? But like, if you don't, sometimes that friction makes things move easier, right? Right. Because you have an idea, you have a soundboard, you have a gut check, right?
When when someone is listening to the stuff that you're saying and your approach, especially like, specifically you have like, hey, this is the OPS, you run this process, it will definitely help, or the way that you work and the partnership that you create. What if someone says, no, this is amazing stuff? How do people get a hold of you to work with you?
Yeah, I'm easily foundable, man. Just search me on LinkedIn. You can get a hold of me there. That's probably the best angle, right? I'm sure you're gonna have show notes and all my contact details will be there as well. So that would be great. But yeah, on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Neil, is there anything that we should have covered, but we didn't?
Yeah, I think it's, I challenge those that are working with other service providers or freelancers that are thinking, this is the down and dirty route. I need to save money, right? First off, it takes money to make money, right? And I would challenge them to take a second look at where they are on that journey, who they've been working with, and how quickly they've gotten to a certain point, or what's the overall magnitude over the duration of time that has actually helped them reach a certain level. Because let's face it, we all get busy, right? Like, look, we're approaching July, like it flies by. The older I get, the quicker it goes, right? And so, like, what ends up happening is that you put your eggs in certain baskets and you put the onus on that particular initiative or individual or group of individuals. But when you have a siloed approach to working with different subject matter experts in specific domains, there's a lot of this going on, right? Like, oh, he's the one that's doing that. She's the one that didn't get this to me. What you end up becoming is a glorified project manager, and you don't account for your own time that's being wasted, or if you want to say invested, right? So it's actually costing you 3 to 5x more than it would be if you were to align with a partner that understands what they're actually doing and that can streamline that to make decisions and help you make decisions a lot more efficiently or effectively, right? And that's what ends up happening a lot of the times, is that owners, operators, founders, they don't realize or factor in their own opportunity costs, right? And it's actually costing you the business, but because you don't see it on the P&L, you're nowhere the wise, because it's your baby and you want to grow it. So you're going to do whatever it takes, and rightfully so. But any business that actually scaled, Apple started in a garage, Walmart started in a garage, Amazon, Bezos, a garage, right? Like, one person shop. There came a point in time where they hired a team. That team now is responsible for other areas of excellence or accountability. But all of those organizations actually aligned with an agency in order to see significant growth, and continue to align with an agency in order to get deliverables done. Right? So I would just question who you're working with, how long, what's the gut check, what's the checklist, how are you holding them accountable to that checklist, and is it time for change, right? Because change is happening rapidly right now. And so, like, you don't want to get caught in a set it and forget it mentality just because you don't have the time or bandwidth to evaluate new potential partners that could be helping you grow instead of resisting your growth.
Appreciate the the perspective that you bring in, because even when you and I talk, it's sometimes it's hard hitting. You don't want to hear it, but that is the truth of it all. Because at the end of the day, you're squeezing the budget. How much can we get for 3K? What about for 5? Neil, what can you do for 3.76? You're like, it's not gonna work. Simple as that, because you're not looking at the growth. You're not looking at where do I want to be. You're just looking at today, tomorrow. What do I have? Let's do this quick tactic. I saw that this is. Can you do this as well? Can you put this on top of the project or scope of work as well? Because you're trying to maximize and squeeze versus these companies that are massive. They work with someone because they guide the strategy, and you're there to make sure that it's actually going in the right way, not squeezing and guiding and you doing the hard work. It's the partner is there to guide. And every large company, the biggest ones on planet Earth, they also work with agencies because of that main reason.
Yeah, I mean, okay, again, at the end of the day, not all agencies are created equal, right? It's buyer beware. It's not to say that it's the wild west, but if your business is operating a substantial ARR, you're going to invest the time to do your due diligence to make sure that the decision that you're making is the right one, right? Now, like I said to you before, if you're on that upward growth and you don't have the budget, then, do what you can with what you have and try to choose a partner till you get to a certain level where you can afford an agency that is going to take you to that next level. Like, we've had organizations work with us for a certain period of time, and they recognized that we weren't able to go global with them in different languages and dialects, and we didn't have specific service offerings, and they needed to make a shift. And we're okay with that, because like at the end of the day, we put a feather in our cap because we were able to get them to a certain level, right? And it's about what you can do with who you're working with for that period of time. Nothing in life is forever.
Yeah. That's right. Neil, I appreciate the time. Thank you so much for sharing all these things, and I wish you all success.
Thanks, Ivko. Pleasure.